Hello dear students, the topic of today's lecture is Jane Austen. Jane Austen, a major English novelist, a pure novelist whose brilliantly witty, elegantly structured, satirical fiction marks the transition in English literature from 18th century neoclassicism to 19th century romanticism. Her contribution is that she has simplified, she has refined English novel by making it a true picture of reflection of English life. She talks about provincial life, life of landed gentry. She is the first who gave the novel its distinctively modern character through her treatment of ordinary people in everyday life. Her novels have been termed as the domestic comedy of middle class manners. Domestic comedy of middle class manners. So the first term is her novels have been considered as domestic novels in the line of Fanny Burney, Maria Edgeworth. Domestic novel is a kind of a novel which is written by women writers about women, issues related with women, their condition in the family, their position in the family, their survival in the life, other issues related with them, love, courtship, marriage. These are the issues. In that way, Jane Austen's novels are dealing all with these themes, so been considered as a domestic novel. Her novels are also been termed as novel of manners. In novel of manners, the codes, the conventions, the behaviors of the particular group of particular society has been evoked. So the novels of Jane Austen is talking about the way the landed gentry they mingle with the people, they organize ball dance, picnic parties, morning walks, or they visit the houses of each other. So these are the codes and convention of those times which Jane Austen is highlighting in her novels. So that's why her novel has been called as a novel of manners. Her novel has also been termed as comedy of manners. In comedy of manners, the manners of the people of the upper class has been satirically presented. Their frivolities, eccentricities, affectation are being criticized, satirized. Like the writers before her, they were satirizing, using satire as a weapon to brutally expose the follies of the people. Jane Austen has used wit, irony to point out the follies of the people, but her wit or irony or humor is very mild, very gentle. It's never to hurt, it's just to expose. The another term for her novels are been at time used is novel of conduct, literature of conduct. Conduct is a behavior, expected behavior from the society, from men and women, but especially a particular kind of conduct is been expected from women, how they are supposed to behave, interact, mingle with the people. So in her novels she is dealing with those things. So her novels are also been termed as a novel of literature. Jane Austen, she has completed 6 novels and she took 27 years to complete these novels. So she has revised, re-revised, she has worked very hard to give the formal perfection to her novels. So far as its plot construction is concerned, its language is concerned, precision, clarity of language is hallmark of her novels. There is it is a mark by formal perfection. There is no loose end, no characterization for the sake of characterization. The idioms that is very distinctive and suitable for the character who is using it. So in that way, there is a formal perfection in her novels. There are the 2 novels, one is Sandition and one is the Watson, which are been available in fragmented form. Then In her novels, what she is doing, she is critiquing, she is commenting, she is interpreting the British landed gentry. The novel writing was already been started by the masters like Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding. But it is with Jane Austen. The novel takes on its distinctively modern character in the realistic treatment of unremarkable people in the unremarkable situation of everyday life. Telling about her contribution, F.R. Lewis, in his book The Great Tradition, saying that Jane Austen has inaugurated the modern English fiction of 19th century. Ian Watt is also having the same opinion in his book The Rise of the English Novel. Both the critics, Watt and Lewis, are of the opinion she has derived her role model, or she has taken she's been influenced by her predecessors in using irony, wit, satire and realism by Defoe, Richardson, Fielding. But what is that? She excelled them. She has presented them in a better way. It's the hallmark of her feature of her writing is its realism. Jane Austen is a realist novelist. She keenly observes the life around her and then she presents that thing in her novels. So there is authentic presentation. Her presentations are marked by verisimilitude. The characters, the settings, the dialogues, all are marked by realism. She has rejected the romantic, sentimental, gothic approach of the life which her contemporaries were doing. Rather, she has presented everything through realistic ways in her novels. In her characterization also we get the realism. They are very alive, lifelike. Her heroines are very alive. In her characterization also she has been influenced by her predecessors. Like Defoe, she has used realism. Like Richardson, there is a psychological grasp, psychological aptitude, and like Fielding, there is a comical aptitude in her novels. She is rejected the way of writing of her contemporaries. They were writing sentimental novels, gothic novels, as Anne Radcliffe has written Mysteries of Udolpho, and the tradition was of writing sentimental, gothic novel, romantic novel. She has rejected it. She has accepted to write realistic novel. That way she is connected more to her predecessors, neoclassical writers. Like them, she is giving importance to reason, to sense over emotion, over passion. She is of the opinion that emotion and passion should be regulated, should be guided. The very novel of her Sense and Sensibility is based on this very theme. The difference between sense and sensibility, thought, emotion, intellect, imagination, and there is a need to have balance of it. But more, there is a need to control one's impulsiveness, one's emotion. If it is not in a moderate way, it creates trouble, as it happens with the heroine Marian in Sense and Sensibility. So one aspect is of neoclassical is like that she has used a formal perfection of her plot, of her dialogue. There is a formal perfection, very particular about the structure of her writing. She is very much like them, very particular about her structure of the writing. She is also paying attention more to reason over emotion. Then she is using the language also. Like them, there is her language is marked by clarity and lucidity. The language is simple, but it is something which is very marked by perfection. And then In her novels, she is also openly criticizing. But not very in a bitter way, the follies and the frivolities of the characters, their affectation, like Miss Bingley, Catherine de Bourgh in Pride and Prejudice, their class consciousness, their snobbishness is being satirized. So she is also using wit and irony to satirize the frivolities, the follies of the characters. So in that way she is connected with the neoclassical writers. In her language also she is very much like them. One thing has been said about her style and language can be said by quoting Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift has said about the style, proper words at proper place is the true definition of the style. And I think that goes absolutely with Jane Austen. Her style, her use of language is marked by perfection. One cannot remove one word or one sentence from its place. It's so well placed, so well established. Now let's talk about her contribution in narrative technique. Before her, Daniel Defoe has used first-person narrative to describe the life of the characters like Robinson Crusoe, Moll Flanders, Roxana, and Fielding, who has used the third-person narrative, like in his novels. Third-person narrative is omniscient narrator who knows about everything, telling about everything. And Henry Fielding is also a kind of an intrusive narrator who intervenes, who addresses the readers by saying, "Dear readers." And what is the contribution of Jane Austen? She has combined both the narrative techniques and first person and third person. It's a third person, but she is never intervening in the narrative. She is keeping herself detached away from the discussion, and she is letting her characters to speak by herself. So use of human consciousness is again important. Treatment of human consciousness is a remarkable contribution of Jane Austen. And later on, her use of free indirect speech, free indirect discourse is being used by Virginia Woolf, James Joyce in the 20th century. It has been said about Jane Austen that her range is very limited. She talks about 2-3 families. The canvas is not very big, unlike Fielding or Richardson. She herself has accepted this thing. 2-3 families in a country village is a very thing to work on. But what is great in that? The area is limited, it's small, but it's marked by perfection. So 2 inches ivory is the term that has been used for the formal perfection of her writing in that small range which she has created in her writing. So she writes within a very narrow sphere, small scale, restricted to the provincial or village life of her age, and concerning 3 or 4 landed gentry families with the trivial incidents of everyday life. About the formal perfection of Jane Austen writing is also been highlighted by her contemporary Walter Scott, who said that big bow wow I can do myself. The big bow wow strain I can do myself, like any now going. But the exquisite touch which renders ordinary, commonplace things and characters interesting from the truth of the description and the sentiment is denied to me. Now let's talk about her themes. The important one is education of the character. It's heroine centered. Her novels are heroine centered. So it is providing young women's voyage from to self-discovery, to self-awareness. Most of the novels of Jane Austen is about moral education or mental development of the heroines. They are committing some errors, recognizing it, and then they are trying to improve it. In Sense and Sensibility, Marian realizes the problems which can be caused because of excess of emotion. In Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth, she learns that first to be proud of one's first impression is wrong. Through her experience, she changes her first impression. She overcomes her pride and prejudice. In Emma, she also comes to know about the people. She understood that it is a foolishness to interfere in the life of the people. Most of the heroines, they are often being misguided by the appearance which is always very deceptive. So slowly and gradually they recognize the people, they recognize the life, they understand the very intricacies of the life. So there is, the novels are providing a journey from illusion to reality. Illusion about the world, about themselves, about the people, and then there is a recognition of the world, of the people, and about the self. So important theme which I feel in her novel is the education of the character. The second is she talks about human nature. She talks about the way the people interact with each other, with their family members, with their neighbors, their personal relationship with the people, and most importantly, she talks about the issues that are related with women education, that is related with her accomplishment, women's oppression, confined and restricted position of women in the society, and matrimony, love, marriage, courtship, another important theme of her writing. So let's talk about feminism in Jane Austen. Jane Austen, she is not a feminist in a very radical sense, demanding the equal rights for women, or very vocal, radical like Mary Wollstonecraft, who has talked about the precarious, insecure position of the women in the society very openly, who talks about that this is a society which is providing no means to women, only the occupation for them is to get married and to settle. If she fails to do it, then she has to remain single, she has to take care of the children and the relatives, married relatives. So Mary Wollstonecraft, her contemporary, she has talked boldly about this. Jane Austen, she knows about this inescapable fate, inescapable existence, fact of women's life, her dependence on men. She can't, she's not denying it, but indirectly, invisibly, she is pointing out the problems which are related with it. Like she has also talked about in her novels the single women, the problem which they are facing. They have to become a governess. Even Mary Wollstonecraft, she worked as a governess, so she knows what are the problems these women they are facing in her writings. Jane Austen has also talked about them in a melodramatic way, like in Emma, Jane Fairfax, she marries Frank Churchill. Why? Because she is lady without fortune, she is an orphan. So she knows that she has to suffer the very fate of her aunt Miss Bates, old middle-aged lady, a spinster. So she's afraid of this thing, so she is ready to accept the proposal of any person like Mr. Frank Churchill. Charlotte Lucas in Pride and Prejudice, she has also accepted a duffer, or you could say a frivolous kind of a person, Mr. Collins. She is of the opinion that happiness in a marriage is just a matter of chance. The woman with no prospect, with no beauty, they have to make a compromise. Otherwise, they have to suffer a dull and a dreary life of a governess. So that's why Charlotte also marries. In the novel Emma, in the very beginning of the novel, it has been shown that Miss Taylor, how she marries Mr. Watson, who is working as a governess in the house of Emma from many years now. She wants to have a settlement in her life, so immediately she marries. So marriage is very important and integral life of a woman to save themselves from any kind of a dull and dreary life of a school teacher or of a life of a governess. So these things Jane Austen is showing through her novels, though not very openly, but we need to work upon this. We need to understand why how the economic insecurity or the insecure economic position of women are significant problems in their life. Like this is the problem with the Bennet sister. When it is the time, the property will be entailed by the male child. In the absence of male children, it will go to a distant male relative. So this is the reason behind the worry of Mrs. Bennet. She has 5 daughters, no son, and after the death of Mr. Bennet, the property will be entailed away to Mr. Collins, a distant relative. So every time, that's why Mrs. Bennet, she is so worried, so apprehensive for the future of her daughters. Every time, whenever she finds a suitable boy, a man for her daughters, she pounces on him. She wants to make an arrangement between her daughters and that very person. So apparently, Mrs. Bennet, she appears a fussy lady, a frivolous lady, eccentric lady, but try to understand her problem. She is aware with the problems of her daughters. What will happen to them in case Mr. Bennet dies? So behind the stupidity of Mrs. Bennet there is a definite cause of fear for her, for the security of her daughters. So insecure economic conditions are also forcing the women to get married. For men, there are various options available to them. They can join law, church, navy. But for women, there is not much position or chance to do anything. She can elevate, she can raise her status by marrying. So, marriage is a very defining aspect in the life of the women. Jane Austen is writing about women, heroine-centered novels. That's why she has chosen marriage as a very important theme of her novels. Marriage is everywhere. Marriage which is greed, related with greed, related with snobbery, marriage as an ordeal, or marriage of a true mind. Marriage is always there in her writing. Marriage is also connected with social status. The people in that society, they are too much aware about, there is too much awareness about class consciousness, about social status. Social status has been created through wealth, through family background. The Jane Austen is also very much critical about this barrier between social status. She is criticizing both. She is criticizing the snobbishness of the higher class and the frivolities of the lower class, the ill breeding of the poor breeding of the lower class. So she is critical about both. She wants that there is a need to intermingle both the classes. That's why she has created a character, Elizabeth, from middle class, Darcy from higher class, and there are the problems in both the class which she has highlighted through both the characters, and there are the goodness also in both of them. So Jane Austen is of the opinion that we have a two merit. One is external, that is been created with our family background, with our social status, with our richness, with our wealth, and the another is internal merit, that is our goodness, kindness, generosity. So she is paying more attention to the internal merit, to the internal values. So social status, class consciousness is also very much important, playing a very important role in the life of women and in their courtship or in the courtship of anyone. So courtship or the love ends in marriage. Marriage is often used as a weapon, as a tool to elevate one's social status, and the women, they have no other thing to do, so they are trying to get a suitable husband for them, and that is the way through which they are elevating their position in the society. Jane Austen has also talked about various kinds of marriage. The marriage which is dependent on first impression, on attraction, love and beauty, like the marriage of Jane and Jane Bennet and Mr. Bingley. They both got attracted with each other, and then they want to marry. Then the marriage which is done to elevate one's social status, like Mr. Elton in Emma, he marries Augusta Hawkins, Mrs. Elton. Marriage which is even mutual understanding, as the marriage between Robert Martin and Harriet Smith in Emma. The marriage which has been done after elopement, like the marriage between Lydia and Wickham in Pride and Prejudice. The marriage which has been done to get the security in the society, economical security in the society, social standing in the society, like Charlotte Lucas, she marries Mr. Collins. Jane Fairfax, she marries Frank Churchill. But she also talks about the marriage of a true minds, when the lovers, they recognize the merit of each other, and it is also based on social status, social standard. So she has presented different kind of marriage, but she is promoting or advocating, emphasizing upon the true marriage which is based on the marriage of the true mind of the two people. In her writing, it seems that the themes are the same. It's talking about marriage, matrimony, but it's not. Artistically and subtly, there is always something different in her writing. One, when reads it thoroughly, will learn something or other thing from her writing. In my conclusion of today's lecture, I want to quote the words of George Moore. He says, Jane Austen turned the washed tubs into the was. In effect, she transformed the 18th century novel, which could be clumsy and primitive performance, into a work of art. Before her, novel writings were available, but that was available in primitive form, in clumsy form. She has given it a shape. She has given it a form. That is her contribution. She invented her own special mode of fiction, the domestic comedy of middle class manners, a dramatic, realistic account of the quiet backwaters of everyday life. Thank you.